Your test number 1 is coming up very soon. I do not provide a review, but I will show you how to go through your materials and prepare your own review. And it's going to include having your calendar out from the syllabus. It's going to include having your glossary or flashcards, whatever you've chosen to compile. It's going to be having a piece of paper out to write some things on, or your in-class pages maybe to flag those. But what I encourage you to do is to go through all of our lessons and look at them with a professor's eye as to whether you would put this on a test or not, and then how you could put it on the test. We do a lot of things in class that are preparing us to learn the concept that aren't going to make it to the test. Ultimately, you need to know the concept and the process. So when I'm looking down this Data for Life lesson that we did in class, there's a word right off the bat, consensus. I would know what a consensus is and how you would obtain consensus, and it will help to think back to that class day and how you did it in your own groups or how you've done it in some prior groups. I'm going to keep scrolling down, and we had a daily water consumption recording table, and then it's like, well, we recorded some data, we've worked with the data, but there's no way we can test what we were doing there. A learning community, that's where we were talking about how to form groups, how to be resourceful with your syllabus, but there's nothing we can test there. However, when we get to lesson 1, part C, it starts to talk about something called an instant runoff method. Oh, but before we get there, right here are a couple of words, majority and plurality. You need to know those words. And if there was a question on the test that said, here are the results of the vote, if the vote is or the election is won by majority, do we have a winner? The same thing of here are some results of an election. If the winner is determined by a plurality, do we have a winner? You need to know what those words are and be able to use them. We worked through some information on this election here, but right here on question 4, 4A was a really good one that we worked through in class. I would know how to do 4A from when we did it in class and where it showed up in your practice assignments. Again, some more information about, oh, here's one right here, instant runoff method. You need to know what it is and how to calculate a winner based on the instant runoff method. I'm still in lesson 1, part C, and this is telling us just more about the instant runoff method. I'm going to go on to part D, and here's another one. Can you determine a winner using board account? You need to know what it is and how you would take a chart like this and manipulate it so that you're using the board account method to determine a winner. This is explaining board account as we go on through the lesson, and then we worked through on how to calculate that, and then we had opinions, whether we liked it or not. For the test, you need to know what board account is and how to look at some voting and determine by board account who the winner is. Also, instant runoff is another method to use, and they mentioned it or called it the elimination method, which is a good hint on what to do. We talked a lot about graphical displays. So this one is a dot plot. You need to know how to make a dot plot. I will probably give you a small amount of data, 10 to 12 data points, and ask you to create a dot plot and then talk about it. And remember in class we had some words like minimum, maximum, the spread, the shape, where are most of the numbers bunched up and what's the range? Like over here on this treadmill, the range of the most popular ratings were around 70 to 75. So just have some ways that you describe dot plots and make sure you know how to create one. We talked about forming effective study groups. I could ask your opinion, but I'm not going to ask something like that on the test for this. We did not do lesson 2C. That is not going to be on the test. Oh, but we did talk about the 5-number summary. So 5-number summary is going to be on the test where we talked about you saw those in your previews and your practices about the percentages, and we went over more of that in class, where the 5-number summary consists of a minimum, maximum, median, Q1 and Q3, and then we talked about the percentages. Make sure you know the percentages of a 5-number summary and what all of the parts or the 5 numbers are in the 5-number summary. Lesson 3, Part A. We started talking about samples and populations. And when we talked about these, especially, and the word inference, that's an important word about what you can infer, but I would really focus back here on questions 7 and 8, where you're asked to describe the population in number 7, and then on number 8, you're asked to state the inference that you would be making from the sample that you're inferring to the population. You need to know how to do that for the test. When we talked about how much water do we drink, we made the dot plot in class. Again, we talked about a center and overall distribution. Make sure you know how to calculate a mean average. Make sure you know what dot plots represent and that you know how to interpret one when you look at it, so that I could give you a dot plot, you could analyze what's going on around it, and then be able to answer some questions about the dot plot. And here's how much water does our class drink, and standard deviations. So no, you will not calculate a standard deviation, but right here, you need to make sure you know the numbers. Make sure you know these numbers of 68%, that's the plus or minus 1 standard deviation. 95% right here, that's plus or minus 2 standard deviations. And 99.7 is plus or minus 3 standard deviations. Question number 6 that we did in class would be a great question to ask on the test, as well as questions 7 and 8. Those would be a great type of question to ask on the test. Depending on when you're listening to this video, you may or may not have already covered 4A and 4B. And when we're talking about 4A, we're going to be talking about probability. We'll be talking about rolling a die or flipping a coin. And specifically, we're going to be talking about in 4A, independent events. And when we have independent events, we can have independent and or independent or. And you're going to have to be familiar with, what do I do to calculate these? First, I need to identify if it's an and or an or. Well, actually, first, you got to decide if it's independent or dependent, and then notice, is it an and or an or? Specifically, like question number 8, when we looked at website information and we started talking about the possibilities of 2 females, random females, with the risk of them getting cancer. Can you look at data? Can you pull information from the data and then do the appropriate calculation to get that risk? Same thing on question 9, to roll a die or flip a coin. What's going to be the probability? And here, this one's using an or, but on question 10, it's using an and. Make sure you know how to find each of those calculations. Make sure you have this set of information memorized. It's the independent and independent or, and memorize these formulas and what they mean. Finally, on the test, we will have lesson 4, part B, on calculating more risk. This goes to dependent events and the conditional probability, specifically the probability of A occurring given that B has already occurred. We went through this conditional probability of dependent and events, and I encouraged you to get a probability kit going at your home. And in this case, we had 4 yellow balls and 6 blue balls put into like a brown paper bag where you can't see them, and practice drawing and looking at the probabilities. I'm moving on down because we were working on how to get to this information, and then specifically, here's where we landed. Question number 5. What is the probability that a U.S. male will die from cancer if he's been diagnosed with cancer? And then we went on to 6, 7, and 8, specifically 6, 7, and 8, looking at these of me giving you either a chart of information or some specific information. Can you do these conditional probability calculations? And that gets us past 5A is not on this test. So I would go back and look at your homeworks. You can view those through your grade book. I would start studying now, and I would make a plan of like maybe studying lesson 1 tonight, lesson 2 tomorrow night, and so on, and then having a review night just before the test. Study wisely, study in groups, go to math lab. I have office hours every day. Look at the syllabus to see those times. You can also request an appointment. The first test is coming up. Make a plan, work your plan, and I look forward to you taking the test and having great results.